Ric Peri, you're Mr. Regulation. You're the guy that everybody goes to when they're looking for an answer as to what's happening up at the Puzzle Palace. So I'll let you start with your hot topics, and then we're going to have to get to the nitty-gritty.
I understand.
Ric Peri, take it away. It's your audience.
Thank you.
You've been warned.
Well, there's 4 short topics for you.
Short topics in Ric Peri language?
Short topic in Ric Peri language.
We could be here days, folks.
There's 3 active NPRMs that are out for public comment.
Yes.
One is titled Maintenance Programs for Single Engine Turbine Powered Aircraft. It's arguably the longest name of a NPRM that you can get out there. But it's important to understand because within that, there is regulatory proposals for management of inoperable equipment on a 91 aircraft, on GA aircraft, okay? There's 2 elements to 145 that are changing. One is the data that a repair station must maintain on hand. It's relieving, it's a good proposal, it's relieving from normal. And then there's some clarifying language for contract maintenance. So that's one NPRM. There's another NPRM where the FAA is taking all of the falsification elements out of all the different regulations, 21, 43, 119, and 145, and consolidating them into Part 3 in general language, falsification language that applied across the board. Again, not a bad proposal at all. Internationally, there's a proposal to require drug and alcohol testing at foreign repair stations. That's one people need to pay attention to.
Okay.
We've got a 90-day extension on it. It runs out middle of April. But that's one that if you're a foreign repair station, if you work with a foreign repair station, primarily commercial operations, so this is an important one to pay attention to. The 4th element is SMS. We know we're going to get a final rule sometime mid-year to 3rd quarter of this year. We know that's coming out. We know that the FAA took repair stations out of the SMS proposal, okay? However, SMS is a mandate in both the Brazilian bilateral agreement as well as the EASA EU bilateral agreement.
Okay.
That affects 1/3 of all domestic repair stations.
Oh boy.
They have 18 months to do a voluntary SMS program to satisfy the bilateral agreements. We have a session, all-day session tomorrow, specifically addressing that. And the FAA's revised voluntary program is being revised as part of this final rule coming out later this year.
Okay.
So we don't want anybody to run out and go do a voluntary program, but we do want these 1,400 repair stations to begin the process of implementing an SMS, because it takes every bit of 18 months to get it up and running and operational.
Okay.
And so that's a big one for everybody.
All right. Next.
That's it.
That's it?
Just those 4.
Really?
Yep. I told you it'd be short.
It's still Thursday.
I know.
I'm so disappointed in you.
I know.
Well, obviously, the thing I wanted to get to, because it's the question everybody's asking, and there's so much misinformation out there. All these incident experts, all these incident, these influencers. Well, I've got, the inside scoop on Mosaic. Mosaic has the potential to be one of the most important things to happen to GA in many, many moons. It also has the potential to be one of the biggest disappointments we've ever seen, because the furor built up over this impending reg is huge. Mr. Regulation, what's happening with Mosaic?
Well, like any rulemaking, Mosaic is followed under the Administrative Procedures Act.
God help us.
And they have specific timelines they have to satisfy. All indications is that it's on target to be final rule, I think, first or second quarter next year, and probably implemented in third quarter 25. That's my guess.
Okay.
I know they got, I think the number was 2,500 comments. I know when I was looking at the at regulations.gov, which is where you can review all these things, they definitely were in the 2,000, 3,000 range, and those were individual letters submitted. So if one letter had 3 topics,
Yeah.
that's 3 comments, not 1 comment.
Yep.
And so my guess is they've got close to 5,000 unique elements, but what they're going to do is they're going to consolidate those, because all of the like ones, the common ones, will get filtered out, and there'll be a couple of hundred focused, unique comments in this process.
What are we going to get?
That crystal ball is going to be interesting, because I think you have to look at what was proposed.
Yep. Well, you and I talked about the history of this
Oh yeah,
last
very
November.
much so.
Yeah.
And the challenge with this is that if you look at Mosaic, it's misleading title, okay? Because it's not
Misleading from the FAA?
I know,
Who
I
knew?
know.
Who knew?
It's not
I'm so
just
disappointed.
modernization of special airworthiness certificates. Half of the proposal was really about sport pilot licensing and sport pilot utilization. My best guess is most of that will come through unscathed.
Okay.
AEA did a lot of historical review because we wanted to give the FAA the best options on the table. We actually suggested that the sport pilot should be able to fly primary category light sport aircraft on down. Okay? What that does from a technical perspective is it's, I believe, 86 knots stall speed on down. Okay? Yeah, okay. 68 knots. 68 knots on down. I don't see a lot of change to what they proposed. They proposed 64. A lot of the folks had suggested 66. Primary category was 68. It doesn't make sense not to follow that line.
Okay.
I think that will go unscathed.
Good.
So for all of the pilots who are looking for sport pilot to be able to fly, more aircraft, I don't see an objection to that. The proposal split sport pilot from LSA. So no matter what happens to the LSA aircraft, the sport pilot proposal isn't tied to the light sport aircraft. Okay? They proposed a Part 22. I don't necessarily agree with some of the limitations of 22, but I see nothing that would prohibit 22, the creation of Part 22.
Okay.
All of the other authorities throughout the world have a 22. It's it's a little bit broader than what the FAA had proposed. I think we should harmonize what 22 applies to with everybody else, but still would create a 22, so I don't see that going away. The larger, more complex light sport aircraft, I think that's problematic.
Okay.
Okay?
That's what everybody's betting on, though.
Well, so the interesting part of it is, I don't discount the availability of a simple to manufacture, simple to produce, larger, more complex aircraft. But I think they hitched their horses to the wrong wagon.
How so?
In 1989, actually, let me back up to the early 80s, The operating community, the alphabet groups that represent the operating community, had lobbied for the agency to create a certification for aircraft to be used in flight training that was simple to manufacture, simple to produce, built to consensus standards to eliminate the high cost of aircraft. In 1989, we had a proposal to allow that. In 1992, that proposal was granted. So the reality is, we're in 24.
Yeah.
So for 30 years, we've had the regulatory pathway to produce the exact aircraft that Mosaic is proposing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a frivolous rulemaking to make a rule that's the same as a rule that's already on the books.
But I think people are hoping for more reliance on consensus standards to develop those aircraft.
That's on the books.
Yeah.
So 1992, final rule for primary category aircraft, specifically to industry standards.
Okay.
It is everything we got with LSA.
Mm-hmm.
Let me back up.
But very little got done with it.
Well, because the policy and guidance was written, the ACs.
Yeah.
The policy and AC was written in 1992. We didn't have consensus standards.
No.
So in 92, the only standards we had was CAR 3,
Mm-hmm.
European light aircraft, and a Canadian standard. And so those were kind of what the policy was written around. Well, fast forward 1992 to 2004, and we start producing industry consensus standards for light sport aircraft. But we never utilized them for this old regulation that had been on the books for 20 years at that point.
So we missed an opportunity?
Yes.
Okay.
And so even today, we've been using industry consensus standards since 2004. We did it for light sport aircraft. In 2016, we added Part 23 aircraft. So we have 20 years of very well-defined industry consensus standards that this 1992 regulation fully supports, but the policy and guidance was written in 92 and has never been updated to reflect industry consensus standards.
So what's going to happen?
What I hope will happen,
Oh, here we go.
and what I have actually sent a request into the agency, is to develop a rulemaking committee to update the guidance and policy for the primary category aircraft to better reflect the consensus standards that are available today.
There you go.
Now, it doesn't eliminate a lot of the technology advancements that Mosaic was proposing.
Mm-hmm.
The electric propulsion, things like that. Those need to migrate not only for light sport aircraft, because I support the fact that the prescriptive piston engine is a little outdated.
A little bit.
But primary category had the exact similar language for a piston engine. And so we really want to take that, and all of the proposal for modernizing the technology and going to performance-based propulsion systems and stuff like that, that needs to be applied to primary category as well. The beauty of primary category is it's exportable. Exportable.
Okay, yeah. Understood.
LSA is not exportable. yes, we export LSA aircraft,
Yes.
but they're not exported as aircraft.
No.
They're exported as vehicles, okay? Because light sport doesn't meet the ICAO requirements. Primary category does. So I can build and certify a primary category aircraft that looks exactly like LSA, to the same consensus standards, to the same quality system, to the same process, to the same self-declaration. Get a type certificate for it and export it worldwide.
Okay. It's going to be interesting.
You know, it's rulemaking, they don't always get it right, but they always make you think. And if you go into rulemaking with the attitude of how to make it better, okay?
Yeah.
We began our aviation life, if you will, in 1926. We're 97 years into the regulatory structure of the FAA. There's nothing new. And when you go back and you do a historical deep dive into the origin of regulations and understand what the agency intended to regulate and how they intended to regulate and how much they empowered the industry to show compliance. When you get into the history of this and you come forward, it's brilliant. And I think that in the case of Mosaic, you know, it's the current Cheyenne object, right?
Yeah.
And it's the what are you doing for me now kind of thing.
Oh, I'm well aware.
And when you look at things like, well, we don't really need Mosaic from the aircraft perspective, because the reality is that we already have this regulation, we're just not using it. Well, that doesn't really feed the how are you helping me now kind of thing, right? And it's a little more complex. The amazing thing is that all of the principal players on Mosaic were the principal players in 1980 when we created the regulation to satisfy them.
Where did we drop the ball then?
I don't think, I think everybody dismissed primary category because it was never utilized, it was always underutilized, without ever asking why, okay?
Yeah.
And it's too hard to explain to people, you know?
Give them that one, yeah.
And so it's just easier to do new, you know, rather than you know, brush off the old and modernize it, update it. But what we have to get to is, we have to realize we have 97 years of a regulatory continuum. And when you propose a change to the regulations, you have to go back to the history to make sure that we're not proposing what we eliminated in 1950 because industry had progressed beyond it. And we see that time and time again. Well,
24/25 will be interesting times.
Absolutely.
I hope that Mosaic is as pivotal as it can be.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know for sure. I've got good vibes about sections of it, I think, as you have, and questions about others. It will be interesting to see what the FAA is saying by Oshkosh, especially Meet the Boss.
Right.
Because it'll be Whitaker's first time up on the podium there. And with luck, we'll have a little bit more information and maybe a little bit more direction and maybe even something to feel good about.
Absolutely. We'll and mind you, the Icon A5 just certified as primary category for export purposes.
Yeah.
That's the poster child of what can happen.
Unfortunately, it's an airplane that barely can get out of its own way. Ugh.
But the beauty of it is you're not limited to 1320.
No, not at all.
You know? In the primary category, you actually go to 3,000 pounds. The primary category was designed to be a 172.
Yeah. And hopefully a next generation 172.
Absolutely.
Whatever that looks like, that could be fun.
Yeah.
Well, Rick, I can't thank you enough for spending a little time with us. You and I are going to have to schedule a couple of Zoom calls to fill in the blanks on a few other things as we get further and further into this. But as always, the one thing we've always relied on in our work with AEA, and I think one of the finest organizations in aviation, is the fact that they've got you to explain the Puzzle Palace and all the crazy things that go out in Washington, and basically how to spell regulation half the time. And I sure appreciate it, as always.
Thank you.
And I
Thank you.
can't thank you enough for your attempts to clear up the miasma, such as it is.
Not a problem.
Crazy.
Aero-News Network's coverage of the 67th Annual AEA International Convention and Trade Show, live from Grapevine, Texas, is brought to you in part by the following sponsors.
Working with GoGo has been very easy.
Great partnership, growth, it's been great.
Reliable network and a reliable system to install.
The upgrade, 100% worth it.